All right. This is how to win CCDC. Win is in quotes for a reason, and we're going to get into that. But this is how to win CCDC. We're supposed to have James Southcott here, um, but he had class. So, yeah. Okay, here we go. Psych, we got third. That's why it's in quotes because we did very well, but unfortunately we did place third. We were shooting for first. Second would have been cool because then we could have gone to the wild card, but third place gets you a big trophy and a round of applause. So that's pretty cool. Oh, thank you. All right, so this is James. He's on the CCDC team.
Hey
He's a
guys,
second year.
it's me, James.
Can you introduce him?
My name is James. I'm like a second year or something. I'm like from the Rochester area. I do stuff and occasionally things. And I like Christ and Chick-fil-A. Are there any other questions about that? Okay, no, moving on. Oh, it's me next. Hi, I'm Asa. This is like the 18 millionth time I've done my Who Am I slide. I'm originally from Texas. I like baking. I'm a RITSEC mentor. Oh, I just added this. I'm a professional Avalon player following the CCDC trip. And yeah, that's me. My favorite thing to plant? It all dies, so it doesn't matter.
Hey, I'm Drew. I'm a fourth year. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm graduating in less than 6 weeks. I got an email today about that. That's crazy. I'm working at SRA when I graduate. I work for Tech Crew right now. I like hockey. I'm the red team chief. I'm on ops, the CCDC Linux lead, and I'm the retired infra lead. Yeah.
I'm Justin. I'm a third-year CSEC student. I am from Fullerton, California. I'm the captain of the CCDC team, and I do Linux and SOC. I'm on the CAB e-board. We have an event tonight, free ramen, and we're showing Panyo pull up. I work as a pen tester at this consulting company called Tavora, and I enjoy cooking, sports, and video games.
Cool. So, for those of you who know what a red versus blue competition is, you know that when you see this at the end of a competition, it's a pretty good sign. And especially if you are one of, or if not the only team that looks like this at the end of the competition, you're doing very well. And that's what we thought too, until we got there. But it's fine though. We were able to successfully lock out red team for all of day 2, which was pretty cool. We're going to talk about how we did that and just kind of our whole experience this past weekend. But yeah, so we got third, but we still had a good time. Here's a lot of pictures from the trip. We were at Roger Williams University, which is in Rhode Island. It's in Bristol, Rhode Island. It's right on the water. So, like, you can see the ocean back over here. That was the room we competed in. The water was, like, right behind us out there. The room was also 80 degrees. Hal brought a printer so we could print all the stuff the night before and compile it all. So that's what that picture is. We ate some good food. Liz was there, so it was kind of like a crazy trip.
Hal also chose to put that printer on the stove. That was a great decision that did not backfire at any time.
Yeah, and then he turned it on, but not on purpose. It just kind of turned on, and then we smelled burning, and it was the cable. It's all right. There were no fires. It was just whatever. Cool. So we're gonna move into Windows stuff. Ace can get us going.
Okay, so let's just quickly go through the red team implants. From the debrief, we're pretty certain that this is everything that they had on Windows. There could be like some super secret stuff that we didn't catch and they didn't tell us about, but as far as we know, there were just 2 implants. One was a sort of logic bomb sort of deal, which was 2 scheduled tasks, which I'll get into a little bit more in a second, but the end goal of that was just to shut computers down. So that was like complete like red board at the end of comp, shut everything down, kick out any teams who don't find it. And then they had this crazy, like absolutely crazy path where they would execute malware inside WSL, Windows subsystem for Linux. As I like to say, they hate red teaming Windows so much they had to put Linux on the Windows machines. But they would use Chocolatey to execute commands inside WSL, which is away from Defender and away from places where Windows red teamers would normally look. And then from inside WSL, you can call any Windows binary and just do stuff. So the example the guy used was shut down. So we didn't actually look that deep into this implant. We kind of just saw WSL was on and was like, yeah, that's not good, and turned it off and deleted everything. But apparently he was calling WSL, like shut down from inside WSL to, again, deny service at the end of the competition. And then they had SSH installed, if you count that as a backdoor, which we kind of do because you should not have SSH on Windows. So let's go a little bit deeper into that logic bomb I was talking about. They had a domain registered called ithelp4.me. They used to do one called auditforme.com, which is something we saw many competitions in a row. So I guess they just changed up the name of it to keep things spicy, and so we couldn't just bring a list of domains to block into competition and get rid of all their malware. To implant it, they compromised a domain administrator. They used SSH to enter the box, and then they nuked the event logs, which would make IR difficult, but they forgot to nuke the SSH sign-off event log. So I can still see that they used SSH to implant it. It happened right before competition, so I'm assuming this was done using Ansible. So then the next stage is, like before the malware was activated, there was a scheduled task that would reach out to ithelp4.me/index.html. And it would get a 404 because that page did not exist. And then they would activate the malware. That was also a scheduled task. I think it ran every 20 minutes, 1 minute. It ran every period of time. And if the implant was active, it would actually find something at ithelp4.me.com, or sorry, ithelp. That domain. I can't say it apparently. And it would save that to a very specific directory. And then another scheduled task would run, and it ran shutdown if that path existed. So this required it just required HTTPS in and out to work, and it would shut down the box and completely deny access. They were called like Mozilla Update and Mozilla Monitor, I think. This is off the dome because we didn't get to, like, afterwards we can't see like all the stuff we wrote during the competition. So I don't actually remember exactly what they're called, but they were very similar to that. They're pretty good names until, as another team astutely pointed out to me, you realize that Firefox was not installed on these boxes. And then they start being a little less stealthy.
So on the Linux side, we also only found a few implants. So Realm, which is like the C2 framework, was disguised as a service called NetRelayD. We found that within like the first hour, 2 hours.
Like less. We found this in like the first 10 minutes of competition. On the Linux side, Windows caught it also pretty early. So Realm was one of their main C2s they were using, and we locked it out pretty quickly. I actually read it as not RelayD at first and was like, wow, that's suspicious. And then went to stop the service and was like, oh, wait, it's NetRelayD. It was still Realm, it was still malicious. But another way I found that was you also should never do this, so don't take my advice. But I saw that and I ran strings on it, and that was cool, you can do that. And then I realized it was Realm, so then I ran the binary with TAC-H, and it popped up a whole help menu of how to install the malware. And I was like, okay, great, this is definitely Realm. So then we were able to block it from everything. Yeah.
Yeah. We also found Sliver. Leah found this during the last hour, so shout out Leah. It was running as a service. We saw a process, and Leah was like, okay, let me look at this. She ran strings, and then she saw the GitHub link for Sliver, which is another C2 framework. So we found that and got rid of that. That was really nice. I think both of those C2s, they did not end up causing any downtime on us because we had it firewalled off very well, but we'll get into that later. Users, there were a lot of users. We secured most of them. Firewall rules, you want to talk about firewall?
Yeah, so our firewalls are pretty robust, some can call them. And our services are always highly available with our robust firewalls. But after day one, it looked like all of our firewalls were dropped, and they also redropped all the users that they had. So we had to lock those out again at the end of day two, which we'll get into later after we stop streaming things. But yeah, they kept clearing the firewall rules. On the router, they kept adding allow alls, things like that.
There were also a few other little remote access things. So we found VNC. There was a custom binary, and it looked like it was just listening on 0.0.0.0 on any interface. So it was just accepting any connections. we found all that and got rid of it. So yeah, not a lot of super deep implants. All of them we were able to find by looking at like PS or system CTL. So pretty nice.
Okay, so what did we do on Windows the second we got into competition? So we have a automated playbook that we developed, which will take backups, run a basic firewall script, install a bunch of tools that we want to use, like sysinternals, stuff like that. It would configure logging levels to make sure that we can see what red team's doing. So for example, turn on PowerShell logging. These are things that like we might want to like go back and look at later. So we want to make sure they're enabled as soon as possible. We take inventory of the machine, we get its host name, we get its IP, stuff like that. And then we run a quick little audit, which again is stuff that we might want to go back and look at later to determine if things have changed. Then manually we go in, we change default credentials semi-manually. We have a script that helps, but we still type a bunch of passwords in for that. We rerun the firewall script because firewall is a very important aspect of defense, and red team might have messed with it. And then we just look around, we do some threat hunting, sysinternals is goated, and then we run a security script, which sets a bunch of rules to try to make the box as secure as possible. Oh, yeah. I kind of said this last slide, but auto runs, amazing. As part of the sysinternal suite, if you are on Windows, please look at your auto runs. Red team needs persistence for 90% of their malware. Or it will not survive a restart like right before competition starts. And so they're going to have some form of persistence. Auto runs will catch most forms of persistence. So definitely look at it, know what's normal, know what's abnormal in there. It's an amazing tool. It is my favorite tool, as the slides have pointed out. And it also got a shout out from the red team lead of CCDC as this is an amazing tool, you should all be using it. And yeah, it's just incredibly goated, yeah. My favorite way, if I'm doing it manually, is to go to live.sysinternals.com. And then that's just like a web server that you can download any executable you want from and just run it. It's amazing. That might be synchold sometimes, so you might have to get creative on how you access those things. But yeah, assuming you can do whatever you want, live.sysinternals.com. Next slide, please.
So now better than Windows, we also had Linux boxes. It's also quite simple on there too because we do a very similar process. So the first thing we do is we take backups of like all important directories like /etc, /home, and there's one more. Oh, and var dubs in case we have any web servers running. And we keep them in a very secure location that's definitely not in our scripts. Then we run our firewall script, which blocks out necessary it blocks everything except we allow our scored ports through it. We'll get into this more later. But yeah, we pretty much block everything else. We install all of our different tools, typically right before firewall, or we'll drop it for a minute to install our tools. We change all of our passwords. We take an inventory of all of our machines. The first inject's usually inventory. If you've done one of these competitions before, you know it asks for like the IP address, the MAC address, the ports listing, something like that. Then we audit the machine, same as Windows, for us to review later on. We threat hunt, just like Windows does. And then when reviewing the audit output, keep in mind that that output was taken from the beginning of competition, because at the very end of competition, probably like 2 hours left, I was looking through one of the audit outputs and was like, oh my god, there is so much malware, and realized it was from the first like 10 minutes of the competition. So we already got rid of it all, but yeah.
So on Windows, another thing that's really important to do, it's always like the number one thing that white team and red team will tell you to do as a blue teamer, and it is changing default credentials. It's really not that difficult, but you see a lot of people struggle with it. I think that's like the main thing a lot of blue teams could improve on, not necessarily at CCDC, but just like in general. If you're on blue team, please change all your credentials. Red team has them. They don't need to use crazy backdoors to get into your box when they can use the front door that's open. We have a script to change user passwords because we do not want to go through AD and issue 100 manual password resets to actually good passwords. So we just have a script that runs through, changes all the credentials at once. and then we can move on from there and yeah, keep them hopefully secure. Oh, sorry, I forgot something on that slide. Also, make sure your creds are not being exfiltrated. That is a very common red team tool, is to exfil all creds as they are set or as they are typed in. So yeah, just maybe look at your Wireshark, maybe look around your box and try to make sure that no one is stealing all your credentials.
Kind of on the same topic, we also run firewall before we change our passwords. We do change them before firewall, then passwords again, because we set an initial password just to make sure our user has a password and the rest of the users all have a different password. We run firewall, so if red team got any passwords, they got the ones we initially set them to, and then we change them again. That way, if they had passwords from the beginning, they won't have our newest updated passwords. And we keep rotating throughout the comp, which Justin will get into.
Yeah, so Linux, changing creds. So the way we do things is a little different because we add our own blue team user and then we use that blue team user for all SSH connections after that. And what that does pretty much is just that allows us to lock every other user. So every other user other than blue team is basically not usable. So this requires us to rotate the blue team user account often. We definitely did not have ASDF, capital ASDF 1234, shift 1234 as our password for like the first 4 hours of competition. Totally not. We would never do that. But yeah, always rotate that account often. Oh, like Asa said, exfiltrating passwords, they actually did have something for that. They call it Larry.py. It is, I think it's a PAM. Is that a PAM module?
No, it's not a PAM module. It's some service that runs and hooks into PAM somehow, and gets all the passwords that we use and exfils them. It also stores them locally on the system. But we saw it erroring, like blowing up our journal. So that's how we found it pretty quickly. It was also throwing we had Falco installed for Kubernetes, and we had a webhook set up into our Discord showing us some alerts. And one of the alerts was this Larry.py thing happening, of how it was hooking into PAM. So yeah.
But yeah, the user script, we basically just have that go and lock every user as well as change passwords. So we run that like multiple times in the competition just to make sure that all of our users have secure passwords. We also have our service passwords. So we had like a bunch of different web consoles for like InfluxDB, DB, Graylog, OpenEMR, stuff like that. All of our scored services. And you have to change your passwords there, which we totally did, for sure.
We didn't. By the way, that looks easy to type. It's not.
Okay, so just some more procedures from the Windows side of things that I'm going to combine all into one slide because they're kind of a little bit boring. So backups literally just copies anything we might want backed up. It depends on the scored service, what it backs up. So if the box has AD and DNS on it, it'll back up files related to AD and DNS. If there's a web server, it'll back up the web server, stuff like that. Logging sets all the logging settings to the highest setting they can possibly be so that we can hopefully track down red team, identify what they did, write a good IR report on it. Inventory takes an inventory of the system. This is usually an inject at the very start of competition, which is why this script exists. So you can see things like, what's the IP of this box? What's its MAC? What's its operating system version? This is also very useful for quickly identifying if there's one weird box that's different than all the other ones and is running like some different version of Windows, stuff like that. Audit looks at a whole bunch of places where red team might have dropped things and looks at a bunch of settings and stuff like that. So that if later on during the competition we notice something's wrong, we can go back to our audit output and we have all of that saved somewhere. So let's say that red team dropped something in our shell startup folder. Well, we can go look at the audit output and see if that was there at the start of competition or if that's something they dropped part of the way through comp, which helps us do IR. And then downloads, literally just download like a million things that we might want so that we can firewall everything off and we don't need to worry about getting to the internet later.
Linux is very similar to Windows, except we have one of our initial rules as setup. And setup does a lot of things for us. It first creates that blue team user that we use the entire competition. It makes them an admin so we can use them the entire comp. We usually have root shells on everything just to make sure we can change things even if we get locked out from something. It makes our backup and quarantine directories. It creates an etc host file. That's very cool for us because then we can just type out like SSH cube controller or like node 1 or something like that. And we don't need to memorize IP addresses the whole competition. So that's kind of big. It updates and upgrades all of our packages. It's supposed to reinstall common services. We'll do that one day. It installs common tools that we might use, like making sure Vim is on everything, for example. So yeah, basic things like that. Then we do backups very similar to Windows. We back up all the important directories. We have firewalls to only allow in the scored ports and everything from us. Denies everything else. Users makes a different password for every single user and stores it somewhere else, typically on the Ansible controller, which is usually out of scope. So we have a different password for every single user that's randomly generated with OpenSSL. And yeah, we store that in the Ansible controller, which actually helped us during this past competition. And then audit just checks a bunch of places like we just talked about for persistence, backdoors, anything like that, maybe network connections. Oh man, all right. So this is part of the topology that we had at CCDC. We had this thing called Kubernetes. With a show of hands, who here has heard of or used Kubernetes? I am so sorry. It's like the worst thing ever. It's actually really helpful. I would love to learn it one day, like actually. But trying to secure it, wow, that was really annoying. Don't ever try to sysadmin it. Try to just like use like software as a service to host your Kubernetes. But anyways, this is part of the topology. So we had a controller, which is the one that issues the containers pretty much to all the other nodes, which are these workers over here. And we had 3 workers and 1 controller. That's pretty cool because the controller can just tell the workers, hey, start this container, start this container. It's nice and simple. And the workers, we can just kind of like manage them like a regular Linux box, and then Kubernetes will kind of do the rest. So pretty cool, pretty helpful there. For this purpose, we're going to call them node 0, node 1, node 2. That's what we call them during the competition. Yeah, so everything is good. You know, everything's running smoothly. We're 10, 15 minutes into competition, and we get an inject that says, update all your Kubernetes OSs. And Braden, who's our Kubernetes god, was like, oh my god, this is so simple. I'm just going to update all the boxes. So we update all the boxes. And then he goes, hey, can I reboot? And we're like, yeah, let's reboot. And then everything got nuked. The controller was fine, but all the nodes just like would not come back online. We could ping them, but we couldn't SSH in. Nothing was running. It was insane. So we were like, what do we do here? So Justin was like, hey, Black Team, can you please fix our boxes? Which cost some points, but it's fine. You know, it was worth it. We couldn't get them back online, so it is what it is. And Black Team was all like, oh, fine. So they did it. That's great. Now we're all happy, right? That's pretty cool. Except 2 of our nodes joined. Node 0 never joined our cluster again, so node 0 is sad. But we were like, okay, you know, everything's still green. It's all working. This is probably okay. So we forgot about node 0. We still secured it, but we kind of forgot about it. And this is cool. We continued competition. And then all of a sudden, our router guy, Tree, was like, hey, guys, we can't access our router. We're kind of like out of luck. So we're like, okay, what do we do? So Tree runs into the red team room and says, hey, red team, can you please give us access to our router back? Which is like kind of cool. And red team was like, all right, we'll make a deal. We'll give you access to your router as long as you give us access to one of your Kubernetes machines. Now, if you're thinking what we did, if you're thinking what we were thinking, it's exactly it. So the first thing we did once we heard that was we made their user and then firewalled off that machine from literally everything on the network. And we walked up to Red Team and said, hey, here's your machine. And they're like, cool, your creds, they're in the packet. Go get them. And that was pretty cool. And we all were happy because, you know, we kind of just like ditched node 0 that we were never using. And we were still green and everything was fine. But we never got access to our router back after that.
Yeah, the creds were not in the packet. They were in the red team packet and not in ours, so we had to end up reverting the router anyways. But it was fun. It was like a net 0, really, because we weren't using node 0 anyways, and we were monitoring node 0, like we had a shell on it, so we were able to see red team connecting to it. So Drew was running W on node 0. He saw, oh, red team just SSH'd in with their new user. We have this IP. Block this IP across everything else. And so we blocked that IP, and it was great.
Yeah, that was awesome. We got to see what commands they were running, but yeah, the IP range was actually awesome because as soon as they SSH'd in, we dropped that entire /24 from our firewall, and like it was over at that point.
Yeah, so node 0 was pretty much just a glorified big honeypot. We weren't using it at all. We gave it to them, and then we got their IP from it, so good for us.
All right, cool. Now to the good stuff. This is where we tell you how to win CCDC, which we're not going to stream because, you know, we have some ops out there. Shout out to school.